Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Pockets of energy. Scientists have officially declared that the Great Pyramid of Giza has hidden powers. The chambers inside the pyramid are capable of collecting and concentrating natural electromagnetic energy. A team of researchers from ITMO University in Russia created an accurate model of the pyramid to measure how it responds to electromagnetic energy. What they discovered was that when the pyramid is exposed to a wave of energy, it can capture and concentrate that energy inside of it. The energy also seems to accumulate around the base of the pyramid. It's unclear what this new discovery means, but it has some pretty serious implications. If the pyramid really can act as an energy conductor, like a massive battery, who knows what its real purpose may have been thousands of years ago? It could have been a charging device for an alien ship, perhaps one that docked at the top of the pyramid using a mounted device that has since been destroyed. It might have even been used as a source of limitless renewable energy to power unknown technology. But later, when the extraterrestrials left the planet, the humans forgot all about them and used it as a tomb instead. If the Great Pyramid really did used to be a giant energy transmitter, what do you think it was used for? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and while you're at it, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Noah's Ark. A new scan of a Dead Sea Scroll suggests the Great Pyramid of Giza may have really been Noah's Ark, but it's not exactly what you think. Historian Matthew Simpson believes the story of the Great Flood in the Bible was not talking about a worldwide event. Instead, Matthew believes, like most biblical stories, the flood only had to do with the Middle East. Matthew says the Egyptian rulers of the time could have used the Great Pyramid of Giza as their own personal ark. Think of it like a primitive fallout shelter for a flood that overflowed the Nile River. The new theory was born when scientists at the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scrolls Digital Library project scanned thousands of fragments of ancient documents. They used a special camera that's capable of utilizing different wavelengths of light at a resolution much higher than normal scanning cameras. This allowed them to read previously unintelligible words on a scroll mentioning the tale of Noah's Ark. One of the newly legible words was Ne'esephat, which roughly translates to gathered. Dr. Alexei Yuditsky at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem says what this means is that the ark's ribs were gathered to make the shape of a pyramid. This isn't the only time the ark has been called pyramid-shaped either. This explanation can even be found in medieval texts. And as many of us already know, Egypt plays an important role in the Old Testament. If Matthew's theory is correct, it would mean that the whole story of the world flooding is just a retelling of a smaller flood that happened in Egypt. During the biblical flood, the pharaoh and his closest friends sought shelter from the waters in the pyramid and called it an ark. Star alignment. A common theory about the construction of the pyramids is that they were built to align with the stars. This is especially true with the Great Pyramid of Giza, the biggest and most important pyramid of them all. Some say its dimensions can be added to equal pi, or that they create the coordinates that can lead us to an alien world. In the 1980s, researcher Robert Balval suggested that the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau were meant to align with the three stars in Orion's belt. The idea caught traction, and Robert sold a best-selling novel in 1995 discussing how the pyramids were created as a gateway to the stars. He began with his original Orion correlation theory, and things spiraled until the pyramids became an extraterrestrial spaceport. But how much truth is there to the star alignment theory? Most modern experts don't believe this idea at all. Each of the three pyramids was planned at a different time. The second pyramid was smaller and built farther away from the first, and the third seemed to follow this trend, as it's even tinier and is more distant from the Great Pyramid. It's likely they were positioned to give one another room, not to match the stars in the sky. Over thousands of years, the celestial alignments have changed. Any astronomer can tell you that the sky above Cairo doesn't look the same as it did 4,500 years ago. This means that any alignment from back then wouldn't match with the sky right now. Egyptian time travel. Researchers believe they have stumbled across something that indisputably proves alien visitors built the pyramids. Nobody can say for sure why the aliens constructed pyramids out of mud and brick, or why they allowed the Egyptian people to use the monuments as tombs for their kings. But regardless, researchers claim they have proof this is true, and it's based on the speed of light. The coordinates for the Great Pyramid of Giza are 29.9792458 degrees north. And interestingly, the speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. The numbers match up perfectly, leading to speculation that aliens put the pyramid where it is on purpose, as a clue to their existence. And here's where the theory goes into time travel. Modern scientists agree the only way time travel is possible is by reaching the speed of light. At the moment, we are nowhere close to achieving such speeds. We just barely broke the sound barrier. Whoever placed the pyramid at its exact location may have used the coordinates on purpose as a hint that they came from the future to build the monuments. Secret doors. Archaeologists in Egypt discovered a pair of secret doors within the Great Pyramid of Giza. They say these doors could be hidden entrances to a mysterious chamber inside the giant structure. However, they have never been opened, and oddly enough, the alleged chamber hasn't been found. The true purpose of these doors has created more questions than answers for researchers. The Pyramid of Khufu is the largest, oldest, and the grandest of all three ancient pyramids found at the Giza Plateau. But there has only ever been 3 official rooms discovered inside the enormous structure. There's the Queen and King's chambers and the Grand Gallery, but there's also multiple air shafts running from each of these rooms to the exterior of the pyramid, likely for ventilation. Mysteriously, there's a pair of tunnels leading out of the Queen's chamber to absolutely nowhere at all. The north and south wall of the Queen's chamber each contain a passage which abruptly comes to an end. Archaeologists say that these tunnels may in fact end in secret doorways that nobody has ever figured out how to open. What's even more interesting is how these shafts were discovered in the first place. In 1872, British engineer Wayneman Dixon found them by accident. He pushed a thin piece of wire through the joints of the masonry and realized there were hollow spaces behind the walls. He then broke into the shafts, revealing 2 empty tunnels leading to dead ends. But for some reason, Dixon never broke through the stone at the ends of the passages. And to this day, nobody has ever dared to damage the tunnels. Would you be brave enough to smash through the walls? Let me know in the comments below. Isaac Newton and the Pyramid Code. Isaac Newton once attempted to unlock the secret code of the pyramids. If you're not familiar with his work, he basically laid the foundation of scientific physics. He came up with the laws of motion and discovered the laws of gravity. Newton was also responsible for pushing scientific endeavors into the modern age. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that in the 18th century, Isaac Newton was obsessed with alchemy and obscure science. He attempted to unlock secret codes he believed were hiding in the Bible to try and learn when the apocalypse would happen. He also desperately wanted to understand the secrets of the pyramids. Gabriel Heaton, an expert on ancient documents, was recently able to look at some partially scorched notes written by Newton himself. The papers proved that he truly was investigating the secrets of the pyramids. He studied them in the 1680s and became utterly fascinated. Newton wanted to uncover the units of measurements used by the builders of the pyramids to make such an unimaginable marvel. He thought the Egyptians somehow managed to measure the entire globe and unlock a secret branch of mathematics. It was Newton's belief that if he could only decipher what the Egyptians had done, he too could measure the full circumference of the Earth. Unfortunately for Newton, he never did figure out how the Egyptians were able to do this, and he never understood if that's how they constructed the pyramids. The Great White Pyramid. It took about 2.4 million stone blocks to construct the gigantic triangle we call the Great Pyramid of Giza. But surprisingly, not all the blocks were the same. The Egyptians were smart enough to understand which blocks should be used in certain places and why. At the core of the pyramid is a thick layer of limestone quarried from nearby, which was supposedly brought to the pyramid on a ship. But this limestone is poor quality and an ugly yellow color. When the Egyptians built the central chamber for the burial of their pharaoh, they used pink granite because they knew it would be able to withstand the weight of the stone blocks above it. Then, for the outside, they used Tura limestone, which made the pyramid a dazzling white color. Thanks to the Tura limestone blocks, it would have been highly visible from miles away, like a glowing white beacon in the sun. These days, the pyramid is not even a little white. This is because in the 14th century, the limestone blocks were removed. A massive earthquake also loosened the outer casing of stone, which only encouraged local sultans to pillage the building materials for mosques in Cairo. By the 15th century, much of the pyramid was in ruins. Its outer casing was completely stripped away, and much of it sat in piles of rubble at its base. What you see now is a sad reflection of what the pyramid truly looked like 4,500 years ago. It was like a pure white mountain, with what some believe was a golden throne sitting at its peak. The secret voids. There is a secret void hiding inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's a void by every definition, a vast and empty space like a secret pocket of nothing inside the ancient structure. Researchers have measured it at about 100 feet long, but nobody has physically seen inside of it. Right now, the void is a complete mystery. It was discovered by an international team of scientists with the Scan Pyramids project, who used non-invasive technologies to scan the pyramid without harming it. The project was set up with help from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities in 2015. They essentially scanned the pyramid with an MRI machine for buildings, and by doing this, researchers were able to uncover an empty space that wasn't connected to any of the tunnels or chambers they already knew about. In fact, there are two voids inside the pyramid. One is small and located opposite the Queen's chamber near the base. The other is a gigantic void located across from the King's chamber. Mehdi Tayubi, one of the scientists involved in the study, says the team doesn't know what the voids really are. They don't know if they are chambers, tunnels, galleries, or what. They could be mistakes during the construction process, or they could contain something that will change history as we know it. PreFlood Builders. The official narrative is that the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed around the year 2550 BC. It was supposedly built as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu of the 4th dynasty, and it only took roughly 27 years to build. In under 3 decades, the greatest engineering marvel of the ancient world was constructed. The Giza pyramid stood 481 feet tall when it was complete. It then remained the tallest artificial structure in the world for over 3,800 years, only beaten by the Lincoln Cathedral in the 1300s. And yet, according to archaeologists, the pyramid was built in under 30 years. It makes you wonder why no other civilizations attempted to build something so majestic if it could be done so quickly. Here's where things get really strange. According to the Bible, the Great Flood occurred in 2350 BC. It's important to keep in mind that mainstream archaeologists don't believe that a biblical flood destroyed humanity. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that it did. The flood came, Noah built his boat, and just about every single thing on Earth was destroyed. That would mean the pyramids were officially built before the flood. But if that's the case, who built them? It couldn't have been the ancient Egyptians, because if the Bible is to be believed, they didn't exist yet. Mysterious alien boxes. 24 mysterious black boxes were found buried in a hillside cave about 12 miles from the Great Pyramid of Giza. These odd boxes each weigh over 100 tons, which is equivalent to a blue whale. They were engineered with such precision that most modern tools that we have today wouldn't be able to recreate them. The boxes were also crafted from solid granite. Archaeologists don't know if they have anything to do with the pyramid itself, or if they were created using the same technology. It's also not known why they were buried in a cave. Researchers say the skillfulness of the stone cutting is extremely rare. It's something that shouldn't be possible without modern technology. This has led to speculation that the gigantic boxes of granite were built by an alien race and not an Egyptian pharaoh. It's believed that the huge boxes were originally meant to be the coffins of aliens who lived in ancient Egypt 4,500 years ago. These extraterrestrials would have been the ones who helped the Egyptians create things like pyramids, temples, and deep tombs way down in the earth. However, mainstream archaeologists claim the mysterious boxes were used for burying bulls. These bulls were sacred to the Egyptians, and so they were given special burials. But no bull remains have been found. And it doesn't explain how they crafted perfectly cut granite coffins, each weighing as much as a locomotive engine. The Universe Laboratory. There is no greater mystery in our universe than where we came from. That's to say, what happened before the Big Bang? We know, at least scientists say they know, that the universe started from nothing. A spark in the dark that led to an explosion of material that would form all the known universe and everything in it. But what was before? And is it even possible for such a thing to be born from a vacuum fluctuation? One of the crazier theories, and something that would change everything we know about existence, is that our universe was not the result of the Big Bang. Instead, some believe our entire universe was created in a lab by an advanced civilization. The reasoning is a little far-fetched, but not impossible. Because our universe possesses a flat geometry, scientists say there is a small possibility that an advanced race of beings created the universe using quantum tunneling. This advanced race would have needed to master quantum gravity, quantum mechanics, and every aspect of physics. But it could have been done, meaning our universe is little more than a glob in a petri dish somewhere, perhaps in a lab alongside thousands of others that have no idea they are really gigantic enclosed ecosystems. The Neanderthal Diet. New discoveries have been made involving the diet of our ancient ancestors. These discoveries are changing the way scientists look at Neanderthals, and indeed human evolution as a whole. For centuries, Neanderthals have been seen as cavemen, brutish pre-humans who bonked women over the head with clubs and dragged them back to their cave. However, this depiction is inaccurate. Recent research has shown that, contrary to popular belief, Neanderthals may have been just as intelligent as early humans. We know they created tools, buried their dead in elaborate ceremonies, and they communicated with one another. However, we still don't know if they used grunts or a vocalized language. A team of scientists from the Gibraltar National Museum recently discovered a tooth from a Neanderthal in a mysterious cave chamber from 40,000 years ago. Analysis of the tooth revealed that these Spanish Neanderthals were carnivores, eating almost nothing but meat. This is quite different from early humans who had a more mixed diet of meat and plants. Scientists believe the purely carnivorous diet may have led to their demise. While early humans were fishing, catching birds, and making salads, eating mushrooms, Neanderthals were trying to hunt mammoths and other huge game for meat. When the big game died out at the end of the Ice Age, so too did the Neanderthals. The Unknown Queen. Egypt's most revered archaeologist, Zahi Hawass, just discovered the tomb of a previously unknown queen who lived during Egypt's New Kingdom period, between 1570 and 1069 BC. Her tomb was found along with 300 coffins, over 100 mummies, and countless other antiquities. All of this stuff was documented in 2022 at the necropolis of Saqqara. The newly identified queen was named Neith, and no one had ever heard of her before now. There is no record of the queen in the history books. Her name hasn't been found inscribed on anything, and we don't know anything about her other than that she ruled Egypt for a brief time. Zahi Hawass told Live Science that he feels amazed to be adding a new queen to the record. Even more shocking is that she had her very own pyramid. Most rulers who had their own pyramids were kings, not queens. It's also extremely hard to believe that someone important enough to have a pyramid built in their honor evaded historians for an estimated 3,500 years. And yet that's exactly what happened. Researchers are currently struggling to find out more about Queen Neith. Hopefully they will make some more shocking discoveries soon. Shout out time! Big thank you to Mike Hazel and Jerry K for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Origins Explained family. Ancient statues in Italy. Archaeologists in Italy recently came across bronze statues from 2,000 years ago that they say could change what we know about history. 24 ancient Etruscan figures were found inside a Tuscan thermal spring, about 100 miles north of Rome. The statues were in remarkable condition, preserved as if they were carved just yesterday. Researchers believe these statues have the potential to change how historians see the transition in Italy from the Etruscan people to the Roman Empire. The Etruscans flourished in Italy, primarily in Tuscany and Umbria, for 500 years before the Roman Republic was formed around 400 BC. But historians have never really been able to put the whole picture together of how the transition happened. One of the reasons is that the Etruscans didn't leave much historical evidence behind. But now we have 24 perfectly preserved statues pulled out of the mud. All 24 are representations of figures from Roman mythology, gods like Apollo and Hygeia. Italy's cultural ministry says these statues were dumped into a body of water as offerings. Archaeologists also found over 5,000 coins, likely discarded as offerings to the gods as well. But how does this change history? It shows that the Etruscans worshipped the exact same gods as the Romans when the Republic was formed. In other words, the Etruscans and the Romans may have been the same people. It may not have been that the Romans absorbed the Etruscans, but that the Etruscans simply evolved into the Roman Republic, then the Roman Empire. The genetic disc. There is a mysterious object that's become the source of quite a lot of controversy. The artifact is a disc made of pure black stone and carved with strange symbols. The object was allegedly investigated by the Museum of Natural History in Vienna, with scientists confirming it was built of lyddite. This is the first part of the mystery, because lyddite is a marine sedimentary rock found thousands of feet beneath the surface. Considering the disc was discovered in Colombia, nobody is really sure how the makers of it got a hold of material from the deep sea. The artifact is known as the genetic disc, and it's been estimated at about 6,000 years old. Both sides of the disc are covered in fascinating illustrations that appear to depict the development of a fetus from conception to birth. Even more mysterious is that on the outskirts of the disc, we see additional information on human genetics. It's extremely obvious that the weird pictures show processes going on inside the human body that would be impossible to know without advanced medical equipment. Even the development of a fetus was not something primitive South Americans would have known 60 centuries ago, that we know of. Some speculated the disc is a hoax, a fake artifact, but others believe it to be completely real. If it is real, it shows evidence of extremely sophisticated medical knowledge by primitive people, knowledge potentially given to them by an even more advanced race of beings. The Cranogs. Starting around 6,000 years ago, early Neolithic humans built cranogs. These were artificial islands built on lakes or on large bodies of water. Ancient people built shoddy wooden bridges or piled up enough stones until there was an island sitting above the water level. Hundreds of these have been found throughout the United Kingdom, from North Ireland to Scotland. But because the cranogs were built on the water, they've been really difficult to study. The only way to find evidence of them is to dive down and sift through sediment. Researchers from UiT Arctic University in Norway recently found ancient DNA while searching through the rubble of an abandoned cranog in the UK. Analysis of the DNA shows something fascinating. The team took these samples from 3 cranogs in Ireland and Scotland. They radiocarbon dated the samples to about 400 BC, and they were able to tell that these sites were abandoned and reoccupied multiple times. But the real revelation was learning who lived in the cranogs. The DNA samples showed that the cranogs were not just ordinary houses, but fortresses inhabited strictly by the elite members of Neolithic society. While the measly peasants had to live on the shore, the rich built floating islands and used them as compounds. This shows that even in prehistoric times, there was always a single group of people more powerful than the rest, using their fortune to build exotic houses. In this case, artificial island compounds. Decoding a lost language. It's been over a century that experts have tried to decipher an ancient language called Linear Elamite. It's a writing system used by the people of southern Iran about 4,300 years ago, only falling out of favor in 1800 BC. The language was discovered in 1903, but nobody was ever able to translate it. Only now has a team of scholars claimed that they deciphered sections of the ancient language, potentially changing history forever. They used cuneiform texts which have already been translated from around the same time. They were hoping there would be a link between the two ancient languages, and they were right. Researchers were able to identify 300 separate signs from linear Elamite representing vocal sounds, but they were only able to reveal a single block of text. The text reads, Puzur Susinak, king of Awan, is loved by a deity, and anyone who refuses his authority will be destroyed. This is in reference to King Puzur Inshu Shinak, the ruler of the kingdom of Elam around the year 2100 BC. The text appears to be a proclamation that the king was loved by a mysterious unknown god, and that anyone who challenged his authority would be killed. It's the first time a full block of linear Elamite has been translated. The Gosford Glyphs. For decades, researchers and scientists from around the world have struggled with a series of hieroglyphs carved into a rock face in New South Wales, Australia. The reason for this struggle is that the hieroglyphs look like they had their origins in ancient Egypt. If you put the hieroglyphs found in the Brisbane Water National Park next to hieroglyphs found in Luxor, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. The hypothesis has long been that a group of Egyptians somehow made it across the world, landed in Egypt, and built a colony. If true, the implications would be astounding. It would mark the ancient Egyptians as the first great explorers, and the first to find Australia thousands of years before the Europeans. However, that's a big pill to swallow, and not everyone can accept it. The area itself is home to many Aboriginal petroglyphs that were first recorded in the 1970s. The petroglyphs are legitimate, but the hieroglyphs might not be. Egyptologists who have studied them have called them fake and have identified inconsistencies that show they were made by someone who didn't know what they were doing. However, locals and many other experts maintain the belief that Egyptians did reach Australia. One of the main theories is that an Egyptian shipwreck washed up on the Australian shore, and the few survivors didn't make it. They only left behind an undeciphered message in hieroglyphs on the rock before succumbing to the harsh environment. White stones in Petra. Archaeologists were shocked when they made a discovery in the ancient city of Petra that could rewrite the history books. Petra, located in Jordan, is one of the most picturesque ruins in the world. Its history goes back to its founding in the 3rd century BC by the mysterious Nabateans. It was a thriving hub of trade and culture, one of the most important places on the Silk Road. Merchants from all over the globe passed through on their way to Europe or Asia with wagons loaded to the brim with spices and other goods. The Nabateans were defeated by the Romans about 2,000 years ago in 106 AD. The city suffered a great cataclysm in the 4th century AD, and that was when Petra fell into ruin. It was abandoned and never truly populated again except by shepherds roaming in the desert who used it as shelter. So now let's get to the discovery. In 2017, Dr. Tom Paradise and his team discovered huge beds of white sandstone. This was strange because Petra is home to red sandstone. The whole place is red, and there isn't any natural white stone occurring in the area. No one could figure out how the white sandstone got there. And this is where world history becomes a huge mystery. Researchers realized that based on particle size, texture, and the white sand spread across the valley, it was likely brought into the area by a flood. It may not have been an earthquake that ruined Petra in the 4th century, but a flood of biblical proportions. Prehistoric Easter Island. New discoveries have been made on Easter Island, changing what we know about the prehistoric culture that lived there. An international team of scientists and archaeologists recently uncovered prehistoric pits filled with red pigment on Rapa Nui. This finding means that even as cultural life on the island was damaged and the ancient civilization here began to die, the people continued to produce red pigment. Red pigment was important for everything on Easter Island. They used it in rock paintings, to make petroglyphs, and to decorate their giant statues called moai. Multiple pits on the island have revealed large-scale production of the material. I'll get back to the pigment in a second. First, it's important to understand the earlier hypothesis of Easter Island. Researchers have mostly believed that they cleared all their vegetation, became way too overpopulated, and ran out of food and resources. This resulted in the sudden collapse of their society. Yet these pits were discovered over palm root casts, indicating production continued even when all the vegetation was destroyed. This proves that even after the islanders used up the majority of their resources, they continued pigment production on a massive scale. How does this change history? The discovery has rendered previous hypotheses incorrect. We see that the people here were still flourishing even after they used their natural resources between 1200 and 1650 AD. Something else must have caused the civilization to collapse, but scientists don't know what that might have been. Pyramids of the Amazon. The Amazon jungle is not what it appears to be. 6 centuries ago, the jungle was transformed by the mysterious Casarabe culture. These rainforest societies built an extensive urban network that spread throughout the jungle in Bolivia. They showed up on the scene around the year 500 AD and prospered until 1400, when they suddenly vanished. Researchers from the German Archaeological Institute, headed by expert Heiko Prumers, recently uncovered 26 of their sites using new technology. Many of them were already known to researchers, but 11 were brand new. The team uncovered 2 large settlements that would have acted as the main cities. A raised causeway extended for miles through the jungle like a modern highway, connecting the 2 dense urban cities with small rural settlements. The researchers also identified canals that would have allowed people to paddle small canoes from one village to the next. No settlement was more than an hour of walking distance to another. What's amazing is that all of this stuff is invisible now to the naked eye. It's hiding under dense foliage and shrubbery. The only way researchers identified the sites was by using light detection and ranging technology, scanning the floor of the jungle from a helicopter. This is the same technique that's been used to find over 500 lost sites across Mesoamerica so far. But there is still a lot of mystery. Nobody knows how extensive human habitation in Amazonia really was. It looks like Bolivia was terraformed by early cultures, and many other parts of the jungle may have been transformed as well. This means the original inhabitants of the Amazon didn't necessarily live in harmony with nature as previously believed. They tore nature down and built their own cities of stone and wood, just like cultures everywhere else in the world. The Forest of Kong. An ancient jungle was recently discovered at the bottom of a massive sinkhole in China. Researchers say it's something straight out of the Hollow Earth theory, and a place where King Kong himself would feel right at home. The subterranean jungle was found by cave explorers at a depth of 630 feet. The sinkhole is about 1,000 feet long and 490 feet wide. It's only accessible through a hole in the surface, which allows in light for the plants to grow. What makes this sinkhole such an amazing place is that the trees on the bottom are massive, some of them growing up to 130 feet tall. This is a place that has never been disturbed by humans. There haven't been any new species discovered, but that doesn't mean there won't be soon. It's unusual because most sinkholes are only a few feet deep. It is almost unthinkable for a forest to take root inside of one, creating a kind of isolated ecosystem. Then there's the whole Hollow Earth theory to think about. The theory was popularized by astronomer Edmund Halley in 1692. He believed that underneath the surface of the Earth is another, more bizarre secret world. He saw the surface of the planet as nothing more than the ceiling of this other world, which he even believed had its own sun and its own giant creatures. The closest we've come so far to any kind of Hollow Earth is this newly found jungle sinkhole. Survivors of the jungle. In 2015, a small plane crashed in the Colombian jungle. The plane was flying from Quibdó to Nuki and went down about halfway through its journey. When rescuers showed up to the crash site, they found the plane mangled, the pilot dead, and the aircraft doors wide open. It seemed pretty obvious to everyone that someone had crawled out of the wreckage, and they were lost somewhere in the remote jungle. For 3 days, rescue teams scoured the surrounding area looking for survivors, but they didn't find anyone. This came as no big surprise considering how dense the forest here is. This isn't your local park, it's a very real jungle with malaria-spreading insects, thick nets of foliage, and skulking predators. The rescue team resorted to setting up loudspeakers to try and attract any survivors who could hear the noise. They almost gave up when on the 5th day, a woman appeared from the brush holding a tiny baby. Maria Nelly Murillo and her infant son escaped the crash, wandered into the jungle, and lived for 5 days before being found. It was a miracle they didn't die, and extremely lucky that the rescue team located them in such an isolated environment. It's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Rock DLR and Amanda Banks for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. The Cambodian Treasure Hunter. Toek Tik was a teenager during the genocidal rule of the Khmer Rouge in 1970s Cambodia. It was during his time as a foot soldier that he learned just how much money he could make by pillaging lost jungle temples and selling stolen relics. He began a profitable career as a real-life tomb raider. The reason we know this is that Toek Tik recently started working with authorities to identify and return many of the objects he took. He claims that in the 2 decades that he worked as a treasure thief, he plundered over 1,000 artifacts belonging to the ancient Khmer Empire, whose capital was the glorious city of Angkor. Toek Tik has already identified more than 100 artifacts that he stole himself, kept in museums across the world, even the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. These pieces were stolen by him, taken from the jungle, traded on the black market, and then sold to legitimate museums. His is a shocking story of real black market antiquities trading. He even snitched on Douglas A.J. Latchford, a man once believed to be a scholar of Khmer culture. Latchford was knighted for gifting treasures to Cambodia's museums. Treasures pillaged by Tik and sold for a small profit. But Latchford was indicted in 2019 for trafficking robbed jungle antiques. Then, just a few months later, he suddenly and mysteriously died. The smoked mummies of Papua New Guinea. Researchers from North America traveled to Papua New Guinea in 2008 to help restore the mummy of a long-dead village chief. The chief, a shaman warrior named Moimango, was mummified in the 1950s. However, local villagers were having an issue because his mummy was starting to decay. Using their scientific knowledge mixed with the knowledge of the locals, the team was able to preserve his corpse for centuries to come. But here's the thing, Moimango was not the only mummified body that the researchers discovered. The Anga clan have been smoking their mummies, like you might smoke a salmon, for a very long time. Overlooking the cliffs of their jungle village are the smoked bodies of their ancestors. When someone important in the community dies, the Anga began the mummification ritual. The process involves smoking the mummy in a special hut for 30 days and using local plants to keep them preserved. It's fairly simple and results in a kind of jerky human corpse. The Anga believe, not necessarily in an afterlife, but in the spirit. They believe that when someone powerful like a chieftain dies, their spirit will roam the jungle if their body is not properly taken care of. They even make the smoked mummies feel like part of the community by bringing them down off the cliffs to participate in annual celebrations. The Airmans Remains. Herbert Young Jr. was married to Zolene McLean in 1941, just months before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Much like many young Americans at the time, Herbert, fresh out of high school, signed up with the military. He joined the U.S. Army Air Force and trained to be a pilot. According to his military records, he trained at Williams Field, joined the 5th Air Force Command, and fought in the 90th Bomber Group, 321st Bombardment Squadron. His wife was carrying his unborn child when he left to join the war effort and fight the Japanese. On April 10, 1944, Herbert Young was a successful veteran that had flown 300 hours of combat missions. He was scheduled to go home, but volunteered to pick up one more mission. He got onto a B-24 bomber, fought against a Japanese installation, and was shot out of the sky. The left wing of his plane disintegrated, and he fell 10,000 feet. His plane crashed at an unknown place in the Papua New Guinea jungle and was never discovered. According to local villagers, he and 3 other survivors were taken prisoners by the Japanese and then killed. It wasn't until 2014 that his bones and teeth were identified. His remains were uncovered deep in the largely unexplored jungles of Papua New Guinea, near the wreckage of the B-24 bomber. Herbert's daughter, who never met him, was informed by the military that the remains of her father were finally found after 70 years. She never knew her dad and was 71 years old when archaeologists finally uncovered his lost remains buried in the forest. Unique blood. Some individuals living in an extremely remote part of the Amazon jungle have different blood than the rest of us. A new study revealed that these jungle dwellers have unique antibodies that protect them from being infected with the rabies virus. This has come as a huge shock because up until now, scientists believed natural protection against rabies was impossible. Researchers with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention took blood samples from 63 people living in the Amazon jungle of Peru. Out of the 63 participants, 7 of them had the antibodies needed to fight off a rabies infection. That means that if they were bitten by a bat or another creature with rabies, they could fight the infection off themselves without getting a shot. Scientists are now struggling to figure out how the Peruvians, who live in the middle of nowhere and have little contact with the outside world, have such unique blood. Rabies is a nightmare because it attacks the central nervous system, meaning the brain. So if you're infected, it is 100% fatal without a vaccination. It's estimated that 55,000 people a year die from getting rabies and not having access to the proper shots. The jungle inhabitants are immune to this, but scientists don't know why. The main theory now is vampire bats, notorious carriers of rabies. There are swarms of vampire bats in the area where these rabies-immune people live. It could be that over a long period of time, so many rabies bites cause them to develop their own natural defense system. If true, it's a shocking display of real-time evolution. It's like people living in an area plagued by poisonous snakes suddenly developing a resistance to snake venom. The Brazil Tablet. The Brazil Tablet is a mysterious artifact from hundreds of years ago. It could prove that an ancient colony from Africa established themselves in the Brazilian jungle. This allegedly happened in 1310, long before the Portuguese ever landed on Brazil's shores. According to the famous explorer Percy Fawcett, the Brazil Tablet was discovered in an unexplored region of the jungle. The artifact was intriguing because Percy recognized its African traits. The tablet showed a Malian king, a man clearly from Africa, holding a tablet inscribed with ancient Mande writing. If true, it would represent a real African artifact in Brazil long before Europeans ever arrived. Unfortunately, nobody knows if the artifact was real or not. Although Percy claimed that he saw it, he also vanished in the jungle while searching for the lost city of Z in the early 1900s, never to be seen again. One of the theories is that the tablet was left behind by a group of Malian colonists who sailed from Africa to Brazil. They built a small settlement, but were never reinforced with additional colonists. They then died out, leaving nothing but this mysterious tablet behind, to be found centuries later. Scorched Earth. For decades, it has been believed that the Maya civilization of Mexico and Central America was different from other civilizations of the day. Specifically, different from the brutal and violent Aztecs of central Mexico. It's been thought that the Mayan culture was peaceful and that they were more kind and gentle than their neighbors to the north. Researchers thought only near the ending of their civilization, when they were threatened by drought and climate change, did they resort to warfare. Then, around the year 1000, the Maya collapsed. This may all be completely wrong. New evidence unearthed by expert David Wall with the University of California, Berkeley, suggests the Maya were not as innocent as they seem. Not only did they engage in full-scale war, but they also practiced scorched earth. They didn't just destroy rival cities or factions, they burned everything to ash. This was a savage move so that their enemies couldn't recover and their people would starve to death. Researchers discovered evidence of a thick layer of charcoal at the bottom of Lake Eknab in the northern Guatemala jungle. The layer of charcoal is irrefutable proof that the ancient city nearby completely burned down. The charcoal layer dates from around 690 AD, while the Maya were prospering. The period matches with a written record of a burning campaign on a rival city called Naranjo at the same time. This is the first instance of Maya brutality being confirmed through both written records and physical proof. To sum things up, the charcoal shows that the Maya, even if unprovoked, could burn a rival city to the ground and slaughter its people. The smallest monkey. A fossilized tooth was found in the Peruvian Amazon by a team of scientists. The tooth has now been identified as belonging to an extinct species of tiny monkey. I'm not talking about a small monkey that might sit on your shoulder in a diaper, but a monkey smaller than a hamster. It lived 18 million years ago and has just filled a gap in the fossil record. Scientists know monkeys arrived in South America from Africa 40 million years ago, then diversified into over 150 species. But the process of how that happened is still a mystery. We have gaps in the fossil record between 13 and 31 million years ago, making it unclear how so many different species evolved so quickly. But as we can see now, 18 million years ago was a time of tiny monkeys. The team of researchers from Duke University and the National University of Piura discovered the fossil near the Rio Alto Madre de Dios. They found a single monkey tooth by sifting through about 2,000 pounds of sediment. That's how rare of a discovery it is. This single upper molar was able to reveal the smallest monkey fossil ever found. It's important to mention that the pygmy marmoset is currently the smallest monkey known to science, but it's modern and doesn't count. This is currently the tiniest ancient monkey that we know about.
The Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are said to be a mysterious library of information that holds the secret to your soul. To be able to access this sacred knowledge, you have to be in tune with a vibrational frequency and also know the right prayer to say. There is no scientific proof that the Akashic Records exist. However, according to people who practice Theosophy, a mysterious religion that briefly gained popularity in the 19th century, it's a very real thing. Theosophy was created by Russian mystic Helena Blavatsky, using the teachings of various ancient scholars and religions from around the globe. She incorporated symbols into her teachings such as the ancient swastika, the Ouroboros, and the pentagram. What she and her followers taught was something so mind-bending, it's hard to even explain. But I'm going to try. According to Blavatsky, the Akashic Records is a collection of all events, thoughts, emotions, and words that have ever been. It's allegedly a record of all things past, present, and future. Theosophists believe the records exist in a mental plane outside our physical world that can only be reached through extreme psychic ascension. When accessed, the record should give you a glimpse at all the cosmic knowledge that's available. They would be able to see everything that's happened, everything that will happen, and all things that are happening now. Some of the more famous people who claimed to access the Akashic Records include clairvoyant Edgar Cayce and famous mystic Rudolf Steiner. Edgar was the same man who claimed that he had a vision of Atlantis on the day of its destruction, no doubt a gift from browsing the Akashic Records. However, there is no scientific proof that such a plane of existence is out there. But of course, that's what makes it so interesting. What do you think? Do you believe in the records? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. The Palpa geoglyphs. Before the Nazca culture of Peru began creating the Nazca lines, strange geoglyphs that were carved into the desert, there was an entirely different culture doing the same thing. They were called the Paracas culture, and they thrived in Peru between 800 and 100 BC. The Nazca picked up where they left off, flourishing from between 100 BC and 800 AD. Both groups of ancient Peruvians had a flair for ceramics and textiles, and they were both highly advanced cultures. Amazingly, each group created strange geoglyphs across the landscape. The earlier pictures left by the Paracas culture are called the Palpa geoglyphs, and they are far more mysterious than those created by the Nazca. The Nazca mainly created geoglyphs of living things. They carved huge images of hummingbirds, sharks, spiders, monkeys, and flowers into the flat desert floor. but the Paracas left behind glyphs of extremely obscure humanoid beings. These ancient figures almost look like they could be human, only they clearly aren't from this planet. They have strange bodies, appear to be wearing unusual clothing, and some of them even appear to have space helmets on. They truly resemble a band of aliens from a faraway planet. Most mainstream archaeologists agree the Palpa geoglyphs were likely meant to be depictions of kings and shamans or other important people in society. But this is just one conclusion that was formed on the basis of incomplete information. The truth is that nobody knows what the bizarre geoglyphs are supposed to represent or who they were meant to be seen by. Many of the images are so big you can only see them from high in the sky, from a satellite or an airplane. But why would the ancient Peruvians create carvings that could only fully be seen from above? It could be that they were trying to entice alien visitors to bless them with their knowledge of technology, or it could be something else entirely. Unfortunately, it's a mystery that has yet to be solved. I wanted to give a big shout out to Tasso Saros and Casey Luder. Thanks so much for watching and supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. The Eye of Providence. The Eye of Providence is one of the most visible symbols in the world. This isn't a secretive, symbolic image hidden from public view. It's on the $1 bill and the Great Seal of the United States. And it can be found on countless churches across Europe and on several buildings that were constructed by the Freemasons. The Eye of Providence is often connected to even more mysterious fringe groups like the Illuminati. But where in the world did the strange and all-seeing eye come from? And for that matter, what does it even mean? Researchers say the earliest examples of the Eye of Providence come from religious artwork that was completed during the Renaissance period. The eye was meant to be a representation of God. For example, in the 1525 masterpiece that was painted by Pontormo, titled Supper at Emmaus, he included the Eye of Providence above the head of Jesus Christ. This was meant to symbolize that God was there with him, watching over the event. From that point on, the eye continuously represented a divine providence and the benevolence of God or his Son, Jesus Christ. It was meant to be a sign of God's eternal watch over humanity. This is why you can find the eye on American currency, which is already steeped in religious symbolism. However, there is still a lot of mystery surrounding the eye. Nobody knows who originally invented it or how it became such a common symbol. There is also speculation that it was inspired by something far more ancient and a lot less Christian. You might have noticed that this symbol is very similar to the Eye of Horus from Egypt. In Egyptian myth, the god Horus lost his eye, but another god fixed it for him. So the ancient Egyptians believed that it possessed healing properties and made all kinds of amulets with the symbol of the eye. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Mysterious prehistoric skull. Cambridge archaeologist Professor Graham Clark recently completed excavations at the prehistoric Star Car site in North Yorkshire, England. This place is considered to be one of the most important locations from the Mesolithic period of Great Britain. The site was first occupied around 9335 BC, with people living here for a span of about 800 years. In 1947, amateur archaeologist John Moore noticed pieces of flint sticking out from some dredged ditches, which led to a small excavation and the first discoveries of artifacts. However, it was Clark's most recent dig that revealed something impressively strange. Excavators found a small collection of headdresses that were made from the skulls and antlers of red deer. 33 deer skull headdresses were found at the site, and only 3 others have been found elsewhere in the entire world. Nobody knows why the Mesolithic people of Great Britain crafted what were essentially hats made from deer bone. Someone removed pieces of the antlers and drilled holes into the animal skulls. And according to experts, these skulls may have once been used as hunting disguises. Ancient hunters may have placed the deer skulls over their heads to make themselves look like deer during a hunting ritual. Either that, or they could have been used in bizarre dances or ceremonies by firelight. It's really hard to say for certain what was going on 11,000 years ago. The flying carpet. What if the flying carpet was a real thing that truly existed? The legend of the flying carpet didn't originate with the Disney classic Aladdin. It first came up in the ancient world of the East, appearing in old Jewish texts and most famously, the Arabian folklore collection called 1001 Nights. In all these stories, the tale of the carpet is largely the same. A magic textile is discovered by a prince who then uses the mystical carpet to fly around wherever he pleases. But what if the story of the carpet is based on a real piece of ancient technology? According to an old Ethiopian legend, the Queen of Sheba gifted King Solomon a green and gold carpet studded with priceless jewels. The carpet was said to be magical, woven on an ordinary loom but colored with dyes that gave it the ability to fly. The dyes were supposedly made using a special type of clay that possessed magnetic properties, pushing itself off the earth like two opposing magnets. The magnetism was so strong that King Solomon was able to sit on the carpet and maneuver it hundreds of feet above the ground. This sounds as if real technology was used to build the carpet. It's a little different from other ancient legends that simply chalk everything up to magic. There are other variations of the story too. Some legends say King Solomon had a magic carpet so big it had room for 40,000 men. But unfortunately, nobody knows for certain if the flying carpet was a real artifact or if it was just made up by the ancient people of Arabia. The Cave of Skulls. As more and more discoveries are made, our Neanderthal cousins become even more mysterious. It used to be that scientists labeled Neanderthals as unintelligent hominids who were so dumb they went extinct. But some of the latest discoveries have disproved that. We now know Neanderthals were creative, they had complex thoughts, and they used tools just like Homo sapiens. Archaeologists in Spain recently excavated a Neanderthal cave near Madrid, which led to one of the most bizarre discoveries yet. They found a massive collection of animal skulls seemingly arranged with purpose inside the cave. According to the lead author of the study, archaeologist Enrique Baquedano, there were approximately 35 skulls from large herbivores arranged in the larger chamber of the cavern. Amazingly, the remains are about 42,000 years old. But what's truly shocking the scientific community is that these skulls were arranged in such a way as to implicate a spiritual belief system. It looks as though these skulls were being used by Neanderthals in a bizarre ritual or a ceremony. The implications here are enormous, with the capacity to change history as we know it. Based on these findings, Neanderthals were engaging in complex ritualistic behavior 42,000 years ago. It's now a huge unsolved mystery because we don't know what rituals the Neanderthals were practicing or what they were using these skulls for. It could be that these ancient hominids were far more spiritually advanced than we gave them credit for. Chrisman Genipertanga. Chrisman Genipertanga is the name of one of Germany's most prolific serial killers. But whether Chrisman really existed or not is an unsolved mystery. We have almost no real evidence that he was a flesh and blood person, although there are historical texts mentioning his name and the foul deeds that he did. The tale of Chrisman Genipertanga begins in the 16th century. Between 1569 and his capture in 1581, Chrisman murdered an estimated 964 people, just shy of his goal of 1,000. He started killing at the ripe young age of 13, and all the details of his life have survived in a book that was printed in 1581. However, some additional accounts were published in 1587. His life and murders were even documented in multiple languages throughout Europe, being published in Czech and French. Chrisman supposedly lived in a cave about a mile from Bergkessel in a wild land of forests and mountains. When he was a young boy, he descended into the darkness of the cave and made it his lair. From the entrance to his sinister home, Chrisman had an excellent view of the road. He could see everybody moving between towns on their way to places like Luxembourg and Metz. And so, he became a bandit. He would creep out from his dark cavern and murder unwary travelers before stealing their loot and dumping their bodies somewhere deep within his cave complex. The sick and twisted bandit was only captured when one of the people he'd taken prisoner escaped and ratted him out to the local authorities. After he was apprehended, officials found his diary in which he detailed nearly 1,000 murders and tallied up the loot he'd stolen. He was consequently sentenced to death by the breaking wheel. However, this is all from a single text discovered shortly after his alleged death. Historians have never been able to determine if he was a real monster or if he was just a villain in some medieval fairy tale. The Western Stone. The Western Stone is one of the largest building blocks not only in the ancient realm, but the modern world as well. It's a huge stone block forming a piece of the foundation of Jerusalem's Western Wall. It's only visible from the Western Wall tunnel, which is dug under the Muslim quarter of the Old City. Although the tunnel is currently dark and obviously underground, it was once an open-air site where the Western Wall protected Jerusalem's Temple Mount. That's the site where the first and second temples of Jerusalem once stood. Since the Western Wall is all that remains of these structures, it's now considered one of the holiest places in the world. The face of the stone block is about 44 feet long and it's 11 feet tall. However, its depth is hidden within the wall, but guesses range from between 6 and 8 feet. The most impressive part of the Western Stone is that it weighs about 300 tons. Considering the Western Wall was built around 2,500 years ago, it's quite impressive that they were able to lift such a heavy object. To put things in perspective, a stone block that dislodged from the Western Wall in Jerusalem in 2018 nearly crushed a woman who was praying. When authorities wanted to move the stone, they found it so big and oddly shaped they needed to use a crane. Yet 2,500 years ago, somebody managed to move a piece of shaped stone that weighed 300 tons from its quarry to a mountaintop. And unfortunately, scientists and archaeologists still don't have any idea how that was done. The Sahama Lines. The Altiplano Plateau in Bolivia is a desolate landscape of dry, barren dirt. There is nothing here except sand and empty space for miles. And yet 3,000 years ago, there were people who lived here. Mysterious indigenous communities roamed across the empty landscape, following roads carved across the desert. These roads are known as the Sahama Lines, and they are baffling to say the least. The lines can be found all across the landscape, stretching for mile after mile, seemingly leading nowhere. They can only be seen from satellite images, or if you're flying high above the desert in an airplane. Much like the geoglyphs in Peru, the Sahama Lines are invisible when you're on the ground. Scientists have been arguing for decades over what the Sahama Lines are. Some say they were built as roads, allowing for easy travel through the desert. But there are those that believe each line was connected to a small settlement, even though nobody's ever found traces of these alleged communities. Whatever the case, the thousands of individual lines were made with immaculate precision. Each one is between 3 and 10 feet wide and almost perfectly straight. Even though they were made, presumably by hand and in the brutal heat of the highland desert, they were paved with more skill than some of our modern roads. In total, the Sahama Lines cover about 10,000 miles of terrain. And while some researchers call them the world's biggest display of artwork, the truth is that we don't know what they were for. They could have been anything from crossing trails to footpaths to sacred shrines. Or they could really just be an expression of artistic creativity. Unfortunately, this is a mystery that scientists have never been able to solve. The Brochs. The Brochs, which are prehistoric stone structures from the Iron Age, can be found all over Scotland, and they are some of the strangest things in the United Kingdom. The largest number of these weird stone towers can be found predominantly on Shetland, Orkney, or on the Western Isles. Scientists think it may be because stone building material was more available in these regions, and so it was easier for the ancient people to engineer towers instead of buildings made of timber. Archaeologists still praise the Brochs as being the greatest construction achievements of anyone in Iron Age Europe. But just what were these buildings for? That's the one thing nobody's really sure about. Archaeologists say they were built in the first few centuries before Roman occupation, and for another couple hundred years after that. It's estimated that they were constructed between about 300 BC and 200 AD, give or take a few decades. Researchers believe the towers may have been used as fortified houses, or they might have been defensive fortresses. Each one was built almost identically, with a solid tower, an inner courtyard, and 2 small rooms, as well as a storage area. These might have been the earliest renditions of British castles. Single towers that stood around 50 feet tall and were only suitable for a single family. The Curse of the Mummy. The curse of the mummy is one of the scariest ancient secrets in the world. It received global attention in 1922 after Egyptologist Howard Carter unveiled the tomb of King Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun had been buried with his immense treasure for 3,000 years when Howard Carter opened the tomb. The burial chamber was opened on February 16, 1923, and treasure was carted out by the ton. Shortly after the sponsor of the expedition, Lord Carnarvon, dropped dead. He wasn't the only one either. There were multiple people involved in the excavation that suddenly and mysteriously died. Initial reports claimed it was the curse of the mummy, slowly doing away with those foolish enough to have disturbed the tomb of the great pharaoh. But is there really a curse of the mummy, or was it all just panic? Archaeologist Dominic Montserrat said the idea of a mummy's curse started 100 years before the discovery of King Tut's tomb. He said that in the early 19th century, Egyptian mummies were used in stage shows to entertain people. That was when fiction authors began writing about things like vengeful mummies, which spawned the idea of a mummy's curse. Professor F. de Wolf Miller said the death of Lord Carnarvon was nothing out of the ordinary at all. The conditions of Egypt in the 1920s were atrocious. Some have made the claim that the tomb may have been filled with bacteria that got the excavators sick. However, it was likely much more sanitary inside the tomb than outside. Do you believe in the curse of the mummy? Let me know in the comments. Beauty and the Beast. Prepare to have your childhood ruined by hearing the true story that Disney's Beauty and the Beast was based on. The story, which was first released in France around 1740, was called La Belle et la Bête, but it was based on the true story of a man named Petrus Gonsalves and a young woman named Catherine. Petrus was born in 1537 and suffered from a real medical condition called hypertrichosis. It's known commonly as werewolf syndrome. It causes the human body to be covered in excessive hair. There have been at least 50 cases documented in modern times. In years past, people suffering from this disease were often sent to work in freak shows or at cruel circuses. Petrus was given to King Henry II as a gift in 1547. The king was amused at first, but soon realized the human werewolf was a very intelligent man. He had Petrus educated and schooled him in things like etiquette. But then the king died, and his horrible wife, Catherine de' Medici, took ownership of the Wolfman. She wished to conduct an experiment to see what kind of children the man would produce. In 1570, she married Petrus to Catherine Raffelin, but Catherine was never warned of her soon-to-be husband's appearance. They ended up being married and allegedly had 7 children together, 4 of which were born just as hairy as their father. And that's the secret true story behind Beauty and the Beast. Maybe they had a happy ending after all. The Palenque astronaut. Researchers have unearthed the ancient mask of King Pakal of the Maya Empire. It was found in the lost city of Palenque, located in the thick jungles of southern Mexico. King Pakal, also known as Pakal the Great or Kiinich Janab Pakal I, was the ruler of the city-state for 68 years, between 615 and 683 AD. He's most famously known as the astronaut of Palenque because on the slab of his sarcophagus is the image of him flying a spaceship. Pakal's tomb has been a source of controversy for decades. It started in 1968 when fiction writer Eric von Daniken compared the image on the sarcophagus to a man in a spacecraft. Researchers have been puzzling over the strange image ever since. Some believe the Maya ruler was in possession of some secret knowledge that would allow him to travel to the stars. At the very least, he may have assumed that in death, his spirit would join beings from another world as they traveled the cosmos. It's highly unlikely that we'll ever truly understand what King Pakal thought about the afterlife. But we can still learn a lot from recovered artifacts. Archaeologists just found a modeled mask made in Pakal's image, giving us the best glimpse so far at what the ancient ruler really looked like. It's shoutout time! Big thank you to Kyle Brown and Michael O'Brien for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like these. The True Cross. The very first archaeologist in history was a woman. Not just any woman, though. Her name is Saint Helena, and she was the mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine. In 326 AD, she was given credit for unearthing fragments of the holy relic called the True Cross. This is supposedly the physical cross that Jesus Christ was crucified on. But after the crucifixion, the cross was destroyed and broken into fragments. The few fragments that have been recovered from the cross are extremely controversial because there is no way of telling if they are real. Most scholars won't even confirm Jesus Christ as a real person who existed. Emperor Constantine was the first major Christian emperor. He changed Rome from being an empire that persecuted Christians to being an empire of Christians. During the religious panic that swept across the Roman Empire, Constantine had his son and wife executed. Shocked and appalled by her son's actions, Empress Helena went on a pilgrimage to atone for his sins. She went searching for holy relics, something that years later would come to be known as archaeology. She visited castles, established new churches, and searched for the true site of the crucifixion. Legend has it, God gave Helena the assistance she needed. He showed her the place where the Romans built a pagan shrine on the ruins of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. Saint Helena had it demolished and found 3 tiny wooden crosses in the rubble. On the site was built the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre. The fragments of the cross were some of the first Christian relics. They found their way across the Roman Empire, then started multiplying in the Middle Ages. Most historians agree the fragments are nonsense, just like the holy nails and Jesus' crown of thorns. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Ancient levitation. What if ancient civilizations could make things levitate? That's a question some experts have been asking. The construction of famous monuments like the pyramids and the ziggurat of Ur would have been much easier if there was some kind of levitation technology. When we look at the legends, most societies claim their greatest structures were built by the gods themselves. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote that the Egyptians received knowledge from the gods to build their pyramids by floating huge blocks. Some historians have interpreted this as floating the blocks down rivers on barges, but others think they could have been levitating the blocks into place through thin air. How would they have possibly pulled this off? That's a question nobody seems able to answer. Legends and old stories mention the power of levitation. However, not even modern science can achieve such a great feat. It brings us back to the theory that ancient civilizations used extraterrestrial technology to build their great monuments. For ancient alien enthusiasts, maybe it wasn't the Egyptians who levitated huge blocks to build the pyramids, but their alien visitors. I don't know, I'm kind of more for the boring floating on barges theory, but hey, let me know what you think. Headless skeletons. Archaeologists with Oxford University in the UK recently unearthed a creepy Roman cemetery full of headless skeletons. During the Roman era, this area of Wintringham was dotted with small farms and rapidly growing settlements. They were all linked together by roads, connecting the smaller settlements to the larger town of Duro Vigutum. A total of 17 burials have been identified, with 11 skeletons being decapitated and having their heads positioned by their feet. One of these skeletons was even given a pottery vessel in substitution of their head. The cemetery dates back about 2,500 years to the 3rd century AD. That was the height of the Roman occupation of Britain. But nobody is really sure what's going on with the headless skeletons. Something similar was found at a Roman cemetery in 2022 near Fleet Marston. That time, 40 skeletons were found buried with their heads removed and placed at their feet. There was clearly something very strange happening here, something with maybe heavy religious tones. It looks like there could have been some strange cultic activity prominent in rural Britain. But for now, this ancient secret has researchers stumped. Magnetic mysteries at Pumapunku. There are some strange magnetic anomalies happening at the ancient ruins of Pumapunku in Bolivia. The ancient site was built by the Tiwanaku culture around 2,000 years ago. These people created some of the most impressive stone structures still standing on our planet today. The first big mystery is that scientists have never been able to definitively say how the builders cut, shaped, or transported the stones to the site. Many of the gigantic blocks fit together like perfectly sculpted puzzle pieces. Their seams are so immaculate, you can't even fit a piece of paper between them. But there is another part of the mystery that's even more bizarre. Researcher Brian Forrester says the blocks possess magnetic anomalies. When a compass is placed next to one of these stones, it completely freaks out. And when scientists used scientific instruments, they got readings over 20 times what the natural environment should emit in terms of magnetic energy. The magnetism here radiates straight from the cut blocks, which look like they were carved using laser beams. Do you have any theories on how Pumapunku was built? Let me know in the comments. The Forbidden City. One thing that's always baffled archaeologists about the Forbidden City in Beijing is how it was built. The ancient people who constructed the Forbidden City did so using massive stones quarried from a site nearly 100 miles away. Construction started around 1406 with the intention of building an enclosed imperial city for the ruling dynasties of China. The massive complex currently consists of 980 buildings and only recently stopped being used for the imperial throne. The Forbidden City was the political center of China until 1924, meaning it lasted longer than the Roman Empire. As you can imagine, it was an incredible feat of engineering. Many of the stone blocks weighed upwards of 360 tons. Archaeologists always figured the builders brought them to the site using giant wheels. However, engineer Jiang Li from the University of Science and Technology Beijing doesn't think that's the case. Jiang recently translated a document from 500 years ago describing exactly how the huge stones were moved. They were dragged across swaths of ice by a small team of men. It took the workers about a month to pull the rocks over the ice, using water as lubrication to make them slide easier. This discovery is amazing because it shows how overzealous archaeologists can completely miss the ingenious ancient building techniques of our distant ancestors. See, it's not always aliens. The Nazca Truths. Archaeologists with Yamagata University believe they may have just solved the ancient mystery of the Nazca lines. The lines consist of geoglyphs carved into the soil of the Nazca Desert in Peru over 2,000 years ago. They were first noted by early Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century. Pedro Cieza de León described them as trail markers in 1553, but it wasn't until airplanes in the 20th century that people realized just how huge the Nazca lines really are, and just how extensive the project must have been for ancient people. For decades, these strange desert geoglyphs have been a mystery, and a controversial one at that. The issue is that the lines are so big that you can't tell what shapes they form unless you're in the sky. There are over 358 geoglyphs depicting everything from strange patterns, animals, even alien-like figures, but they were all drawn to gigantic proportions, invisible unless you happen to be hovering over the landscape in a hot air balloon, or maybe a spacecraft. The team of researchers from Yamagata University believe the lines were used as a form of communication. Researchers say the figures were pathways leading from one village to the next. They say the animals were drawn alongside the pathways to mark the routes moving between settlements. However, that still doesn't explain how the ancient Nazca made them, or how they could tell the difference from the ground. Bosnia's Pyramid of the Sun. There is a pyramid supposedly hiding in the Balkans, overgrown with trees and shrubs. To the untrained eye, it looks like nothing but a large grassy hill overlooking the town of Visoko in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But to some self-proclaimed archaeologists, the grassy hill is a giant pyramid. In 2005, businessman Sam Osmanagic made claims that the hill constitutes the largest ancient pyramid on the planet. He says it was likely built by the Illyrians, who dominated this part of Europe between 12,000 and 500 BC. The pyramid itself dates back about 8,000 years and was part of a much larger complex. The remains of all these buildings are now overgrown and look like completely ordinary hills. In one of the most outrageous cases of pseudo-archaeology ever, the hills have become a major tourist attraction. Local authorities have funded excavations which have yielded no results. School children are being taken to the hills and taught that they are part of Bosnian heritage. The place has become a massive tourist destination despite the fact there is no archaeological evidence alluding to the existence of pyramids. As far as mainstream archaeologists are concerned, the hills are made of nothing but soil and grass. Thanks for watching! Do you really think there were levitating pyramids in the ancient past? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!